Church family, April 15th, 2020. This is the day that we would typically be filing our taxes. We've graciously been given an extension this year. It's an extension that I am actually taking advantage of, so I'm grateful for that. I'm the father of twins, and there's a great old story about twin brothers that I've always found pretty hilarious. And the brothers' names were Bill and Joey. And Bill, man, he was a pessimist. He had kind of a negative outlook on his entire life. And Joey was the exact opposite. Joey was so positive, so optimistic. The glass was always half full for this other brother. And the parents were very perplexed by the attitudes of the two boys. And so what they decided to do was one Christmas, they were going to shower Bill with the best gifts that they could think of. And that they were going to give Joey, the optimist, a box of manure. And so that Christmas morning came, and the boys came downstairs, and Bill opened his gifts first. And as he opened up a toy train, he was so elated and excited. But he also said, I'll probably electrocute myself. And then as he opened a BB gun, he said to his parents, "Oh, this is something I've always wanted, but I'll likely shoot my eye out." And then lastly, as he opened a big box of candy, he looked at his folks and said, "This is my favorite kind of candy. I'll eat all of this today and probably get a stomach ache." Well, the attention then turned to Joey, and he opened up his gift excitedly and saw that it was a box of manure. And his parents said, well, Joey, what did you get?" And he said, "Well, it looks like I got a pony, but I don't know where you hid him." I love that story because it is a great illustration on the power of perspective and how we view our lives and how that impacts the joy and the countenance that we walk around with. There's a great book in the New Testament written by the Apostle Paul. It's the book of Philippians. And the book of Philippians is a great lesson on the power of perspective. And it has a lot in it that we all love. I can't think of another book of the Bible with so many just quotable, pithy bits of scripture. Philippians 1:21, to live is Christ, to die is gain. What a beautiful a philosophy of life Philippians 1:21 is. And then there's Philippians 4:13. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. I think every athlete has that as their favorite verse at one point in their life. Then there's another, what I call another coffee mug verse. Be anxious for nothing, but in everything, by prayer and supplication, present your requests to God. Just verse after verse in Philippians that I think we've hidden in our hearts over times that minister to us in deep ways. But there's a verse in the first chapter that is easily overlooked. And there's a little phrase in verse 16 that typically I think you would just read past if not paying close attention. And it's where Paul tells the Philippians something very profound. He says to them, "I have been put here for the defense of the gospel." And if you know anything about the book of Philippians, you know that it's a prison letter. Paul wrote to the church at Philippi from prison in Rome. And because he was in prison in Rome, the Philippian church, which he had founded 10 years earlier, had sent to him this love offering, this gift through a messenger, a guy named Epaphroditus. And when Paul got that gift, he wanted to assure the Philippians that his ministry was still going, that his kingdom impact was still profound. Even though he was in jail, the gospel was still advancing. And so there at the start of the letter, he tells them, "I have been put here, even though I'm in prison. I didn't wind up here. I'm not stuck here. I'm not trapped here. But I have been put here for the defense of the gospel." And the reason that's so profound is because Paul is again leaning on God's sovereignty. Now, left to our wisdom, we would say a force like Paul, the evangelist and the church planter that Paul was, he would need to be on the front lines of ministry. God would need to have him out there so that he would be planting churches and advancing the gospel in incredible ways as he wanted to see it extend all the way to Spain. But no, God has him in house arrest in the city of Rome, chained to a guard 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And Paul's perspective on that is, I have been put here. You know, as we live out this pandemic together, we're in our individual homes, and it feels a little bit like we're under house arrest. We can't go where we normally want to go. We can't do what we normally want to do. We can't even watch the sports and some of the programming on television that we normally would want to watch. And so we have this feeling that we're stuck, that we're trapped, that we've ended up in these circumstances, and we live these lives with endless options. But right now, we really don't have any options. And so, what's our perspective? Are we stuck here, or have we been put here? Have we been put here for some eternal purpose that God has for us? And maybe it's a purpose within your neighborhood. Maybe it's a purpose within the four walls of your own home, a ministry that you need to deepen with your spouse or your kids. Why have you been put here in this time and in this place for this purpose? It's a great question to ask. I'll close with telling you a story about a guy named John Bunyan. John Bunyan lived in the 17th century, and he was a preacher. He was a Puritan preacher in England, which was not a popular thing to be, at least amongst the magistrates and the authorities of the country. And so John Bunyan was put in prison for his fiery and effective gospel preaching. And he was put in the Bedford jail for 12 years. And in the first part of his time there, he continued to preach the gospel from behind the walls of his cell. And he preached so thunderously and so profoundly that people would gather around the jail to hear John Bunyan preach. Well, the magistrates did not appreciate this very much, and so they found ways to put him deeper and deeper into the jail, finally getting him to a point where nobody outside of the walls of the jail could hear him preach. And with that, what John Bunyan set out to do was write the most popular book outside of the Bible. It's a book called The Pilgrim's Progress. And The Pilgrim's Progress is probably the most profound theological work published in the last 300 years. And so what John Bunyan decided to do with his perspective was not say, man, I'm stuck here. Man, I wish I could get out of here. Man, I don't know how I ended up here. But he had that philosophy that Paul had, where he said, I've been put here. And he redeemed that time in a very profound way. How will you redeem the time? How will you lay hold of that perspective that says, you know what? I'm not stuck here. I've been put here for some purpose that God has for me. Can't wait to see you again, church. I can't wait to gather. I don't know when that's going to be, but my prayer is soon. Be well.